here.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everybody. It's Friday, October the 10th, 2014 at 11 a.m. Thank you everybody for being here. We'll call this meeting to order today. And we'll start out by, since we are doing a recording and we have people on the phone just for voice purposes, I'm Brian Murphy. I'll be chairing the committee today, and then we'll just kind of go around the table, to just the table, and please introduce yourselves.
Lee Warren.
Fred Wilcox.
Barbara Evans.
Kristen Warman.
Michael Malloy.
Doug Oldingson.
Bill Jones.
Carrie Lewis. Gwen Jackson.
Stephen Reinhardt.
Tony Slagle.
Brad Phillips.
Michael D. Hart.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. We do have a quorum, so we can start our meeting.
Greg.
And I'm sorry, Greg?
Present.
There we go. And so we have discussion, possible action to excuse absences, if any. We do have two. And so does anybody want to make a motion for absentees? No, it's just one. Elizabeth.
It's a repeated occurrence. I see no reason to excuse it.
Okay, sounds good. And then we'll just move on to number 3, ratify the minutes from the July 28, 2014 meeting. For those who were present, we received an email link yesterday for the minutes. Is there any suggested changes?
Did we get them sooner?
Yeah, I apologize.
Tony's throwing himself under the bus. I was supposed to read them Monday and I did not.
Okay.
But I need to get them to him sooner anyway. There was some technical issues, and so when I wasn't comfortable sending them prior to that date. So.
I knew they came in, but
I
I
was
had time to get
saving you, Tony. Let it ride.
Okay.
He was. He did. I assume they're correct, right, Michael?
Well, they're
Perfect.
It's like a video.
I like
Yeah.
I like the
they're
format.
audio video.
Audio video.
So I mean,
We like that.
They are what
That
they
was
are.
flat.
they are what they are.
Did we look cute?
Do we have a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Second?
I think we got
You got
Barbara and
both.
Fred almost
Yeah, but-
simultaneous.
Okay.
Not me.
No, with Lee.
Oh.
You sound like him.
Oh,
Mini me.
Stop.
Gee.
This was going to be a fast meeting.
Absolutely.
Sound disdain in my voice, is that what it is?
So motion to approve, second. No discussion? Vote for approval?
Aye.
There. Good. You don't- Okay, good. Then we'll just go straight to staff reports, number 5. Let me get
This is Brian.
number 4. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Is there any general comments on non-agenda items? So public comments on non-agenda items? Fred?
I'll just clarify this first.
Introduce
Fred Buck.
yourself.
I'm Fred Buck, just a licensed inspector. Is this where I need to stand?
Sure.
Okay.
Anywhere in the room.
Okay. Is there anything on the agenda pertaining to CSST or bonding today?
Not today.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is make a presentation briefly to you, just to remind you of that topic being hot as far as the topic involving inspectors. Specifically, I'd like to thank you, first of all, for the topic being brought up in the April meeting. If you'll go back and look at the minutes and listen to yourselves identify that topic or discuss it. One of the comments that was made by Chairman Murphy, which I would totally agree with and encourage you to consider in the future, would be for this committee to take a leadership position or leadership role in encouraging more education for inspectors and especially for real estate agents pertaining to the identification and the installation of CSST gas piping. That's based upon recent jury verdicts or lack thereof of jury verdicts, specifically of lawsuits involving an inspector and lawsuits involving the loss of life in Lubbock for a gentleman, Brandon Teal. I would encourage this committee or this subcommittee or the full committee to identify whatever you can do to help bring this issue better to the public. There's been an article written in the Advisor. That's a start. My suggestion to you would include things like having additional information placed in the OPI, OP-I, which is the hazards form. If you're going to do that, then you're also going to include the topic on page 2 of the standard mandatory inspection report form, the latest one, 7-4. Another consideration would be to include this topic in your mandatory continuing education classes, especially for both real estate agents and inspectors. So for example, the real estate agents have a book they have to follow that says here's what has to be taught to licensees when they take their mandatory continuing education class. Typically or sometimes there's a topic within that mandatory booklet that says here are items dealing with property condition and or inspections. Due to the loss of life and to the fact that subrogation is part of the process now against real estate licensees, inspectors, and agents, the insurance company's subrogation policies or behavior is something that this state needs to take into attention or consideration for the future of this topic. So the classes for continuing education need to be included for both agents and inspectors. The examples in the seller disclosure that are already there are things like aluminum wiring. A few years ago, the decision was made to tell the buyer that the seller's house has aluminum wiring. With the demonstration or the material that was brought to your meeting today by Mr. Reinhardt with the flexible gas tubing that got hit by lightning and has a hole in it, that's a hot topic. It happens. And I think we owe it to the consumers of the state of Texas to bring this topic back to the table for this committee to consider, to communicate both to the public and to the inspectors. Just deciding to leave the standards the way they were, like you did at the April meeting, in my opinion, falls short of the responsibilities that the Real Estate Commission has on this topic. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Are you suggesting possibly adding it to the standards?
I'm not here to make any statements or recommendations as to how the standard should be changed or impacted. This committee made a decision in April that gave the impression to the public and to the media that was here that the existing standards have identified this product correctly. Personally, I disagree with the decision that you made, but I'm not here to tell you how the standard should be adjusted or changed.
Thank you, Fred.
Thanks.
Still general comments for visitors on non-agenda items. So if it's on the agenda, this isn't the time to speak, but if you have a non-agenda item, you can speak. So, Mike, identify yourself.
Good morning, my name is Mike Cothran. I'm a licensee, inspector licensee, and here on behalf of DeFree as well. I'd like to chime in behind Fred as far as the CSST. Since the case has been closed, several things have come into play, and just not to bore you with all the details and the tiers, essentially the CSST manufacturers were effectively attempting to cast the blame that they probably hold, at least in my opinion, onto electricians and inspectors, and it really behooves TREC to make some moves in regards to CSST, both to better clarify to their licensees how they'd like to have them approach it, and ultimately for the benefit of the consumers of Texas. So I would like to throw my weight behind what Fred has said. Second thing, if you will please, and it's actually a good thing, and it speaks to Ms. Jackson and her department, I wanted to let you know how well her renewals were. Back in June, on a Wednesday, I got my fingerprints taken. Thursday, I went online and I paid my bill and paid up to get the background check, paid my bill for my renewal, and Monday morning in my email box I had my renewal, and I was so appreciative. I was actually at the end of my line, and I really want to thank you and your department for an outstanding job. in my case right here. I appreciate it. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you, Mike.
Sure.
Steve, do you have the piece of CSST?
It's on the chair behind Barbara.
Since it's brought up, a lot of people don't realize that's CSST too. Okay? Because it's not yellow sheet, it's still CSST. Just wanted to take care of that. Thank you.
So virtually every house, it's just the gas connector between the hard pipe and the
It's an
water heater.
improved gas connector.
Yeah.
So we won't have that argument right now.
No, it was just an example that
I just want to show what it was.
lightning hit that house or in the vicinity, and it came out of the connector and hit the water heater. So regardless of the type of pipe, it just became more visible.
Any other general comments, non-agenda item related? Good. We'll move on to number 5, staff reports. Anybody want to jump in first?
I'm happy to get started. It says AMS is the first report on there, so Doug Oldmixon, I'm the administrator of the commission, and I want to thank the committee members for all the work that they have been doing for the past. There's been a lot of committee meetings, subcommittee meetings, and committee meetings as we complete the process of our once every 4 years formal rule review. And this year we took a deep dive on all of the education-related issues, especially last year, as you recall, we spent a lot of time on wrapping up the SOP, and then we did the report form that goes along with that. And this year we're looking very carefully at all of the education issues. And in fact, many of the committees have agreed to take on an even more intense kind of rebuilding effort or rethinking effort for our education. As many of you know, Texas has by far the largest number of education hours required. That's true both in the real estate side and on the inspection side. On the inspection side, it's even more glaring, if you will, the discrepancy between what many states do, or on average other states do, and what Texas requires. And part of the history of that, and I won't bore you with a whole lot of it, but anytime there's a problem, it appears that in the past one of the suggested solutions was we need more education. And while that is an admirable position to take, because often acting out of ignorance is remediable by additional education, what we didn't spend time doing was looking at the content and the quality of the education. And so that's what this committee and the subcommittee has agreed to do. And I thank you very much for the initiative and all of the hard work that is going to go into really rebuilding, looking at our education requirements and then rebuilding those kind of from the ground up. And that's similar to what the Education Standards Advisory Committee has done on the real estate side. And of course, we do bring or make you aware of their recommendations. I know Stephen has been to their meetings, and there are things to be learned there from bringing in perspectives of outside stakeholders that may be applicable for this committee. So I thank you sincerely for the amount of work that you have undertaken, and the promise of future attention to these very important matters. And I just want to let you know that the staff will be here to provide all of the support that we possibly can to make sure that your effort bears fruit. So, thank you.
Is that it?
That's it.
Thank you, Doug. And I apologize earlier, wanted to recognize Bill Jones, one of our commissioners, for being here today.
Thanks.
Thanks for your attendance here. And standards and enforcement services?
Anything education and licensing? That's the first one on the list.
Administration, management, standards, and enforcement, and then education.
However you do it. I was just looking at the agenda that was published.
That's
On
what's
the-
on
on
the
the
agenda.
Items.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
However you want it.
Well, I included the full fiscal year 2014 and the limited amount of 2015 disciplinary action. Since it's only early October, we've only had one disciplinary action for 2015. And I think since your last meeting for fiscal 20 year 14, it's the last case on the second page that you did not see prior to your last meeting, the August 29th case. I think we had a productive year overall, 2014. I was looking at the statistics, and we had 12 formal disciplinary actions and 9 informal advisory letter ones. In comparison to last fiscal year 2014, or fiscal year 2013, we had 4 formal disciplinary actions versus 17 advisory letters. The amount of discipline overall was the same, 21 cases. And that, on average, from the past reports I looked at, that's about average. We can do about a quarter of, or a third of the complaints that receive disciplinary action. Currently, we have 15 cases open. The oldest one is from May 2013. I want to thank Mr. Phillips. We had our first state office SOA hearing on a inspector case. I think it went well. We're still waiting for the judge to come back, but I appreciate him stepping in and being an expert, one of our experts.
Oh, it wasn't against him.
Not this time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
If anyone has any questions, yes.
I saw the last one on there is failed to file a DBA
Yes.
commission. And Tony and I have talked about this, trying to find out what the actual rule is there as far as filing DBA inspectors, so on and so forth.
It's in the rules
It's
that
in the-
you, when you're operating under a DBA, that you notify TREC that you're in. It's just a letterhead. You go, I'm so-and-so, licensed so-and-so, operating under this business name, to whom it may concern. And
But any business
thank you.
name, any inspector doing business as a company has to file a DBA, correct?
Right, I'm a Action Home Inspection Group, and I have set X amount of inspectors. So I just list all my inspectors and their license number, all operating under a Action Home Inspection
The
Group.
reason I ask is I've been
Okay.
running into a problem with Collin County Association of Realtors, which I sit on the board of directors for. We have inspectors that come in, obviously be new members and so on and so forth, and they're trying to do them as companies, and yet I go on TREC's website and those DBAs are not shown. And so I turn them down as far as, unless you're doing it as an individual, but if you're doing it as a company, you have to file that DBA.
They can register the name under, since you guys don't license company, and since inspection companies are not licensed anymore, or we don't accept applications for them anymore. If you have a company name, we assume that's an assumed business name.
Right.
We don't really call them DBAs under our rules, but they just need to send in on writing or email licensing or whomever informing us the use of it.
Okay, because Collin County has called up here a number of times and has not been able to get a straight answer on that, which is why I'm wanting to ask you.
They're free to call me if they like.
Okay. Another question I had, there is one inspector that has been fined $10,000, 3 different occasions, hasn't been licensed since '06, he's still doing inspections.
He's still doing inspections, that guy they called to.
He's still doing inspections. The
Individual
guy-
Dallas?
Yeah,
Yep.
He's actually based in Addison.
I had an agent call me about 3 weeks ago.
We tried to prosecute him, honestly, and Dallas County didn't want to prosecute. They turned down it because it's a misdemeanor, and yeah, that was the reasoning behind it. You're free to send, if you got inspection reports, yeah, that's the best proof.
Yeah.
If you have a copy of an inspection report, send me it, and we'll consider it. We go through all the, we go through and prosecute as far as we can. If we get some more cases, maybe we can get a prosecutor interested.
Because he just caused a substantial amount of damage on the last property. But do we have a way of knowing if he's actually paid those 3 fines?
He is not, no.
So what's the point in finding somebody if they're not going to?
Well, it's referred to the AG, and the Attorney General is the one that enforces the collection of.
It's been,
eminent
he's had
domains.
2 here now, so that would be the 3rd offense.
No, he's got,
Is it 3 here?
I don't,
Jeff
some
Gardner.
were from
Jeff
2013, so I don't.
yeah,
I think all of them, I think, were from 2013 fiscal year, so.
Yeah. I saw
There
3
was
of them with his
2
name.
then,
on,
I
or
don't,
3
there
separate.
could have been one prior, I don't know.
So I guess where I'm going with this is, we can all talk enforcement and show a big game, but if we can't actually enforce anything, what's the point?
It's a
That's outrageous.
legislative decision.
So, I
I
mean,
can tell you that we have the same issues enforcing unlicensed activity on the broker and salespersons.
it's almost like, what's the point of us even having this agency or this committee or any of this if we're not going to be able to, if we don't have the ability to enforce these rules?
You do have those rare road ones. that
Could
gets
we
one.
arm enforcement people?
Normally people stop.
And then y'all can just take care of it on the
Need a
spot?
badge and a gun.
So I just said we'll arm them. It's not them, it's, the Attorney General and the county attorneys won't prosecute it because there's nothing in it for them. So, it's the same, how many crimes go reported and file complaints and DAs don't prosecute? They can't make them. Like you can't make a seller fix
But
that.
that's outrageous.
Oh, it's crazy.
But
One
that's, you
thing
vote
that
out
has-
your Attorney General.
One thing that consistent with our consumer protection role, and this has happened a few times, you can call the consumer hotline reporter or whatever at the local TV station, really is to get the information out so that people don't use them. Get it publicized. They'll dig into it and they'll find out, there are 3 $10,000 fines, and they'll splash it all over the airwaves. And, the guy, obviously, in a big enough market, you're still gonna find somebody who doesn't know who you are.
Absolutely.
And he's undercutting on price or whatever he's doing to get business.
He still has a website up.
Oh, I have his inspection report here from August 6th.
You need to, DFW
Oh, he has
area,
his
get this
license
to.
number.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's fraudulent.
It might-
That has to be more than a
might-
misdemeanor if he's still posting a license number.
It doesn't have to be a big market, even in a medium market like ours. We had the one broker that was just going nuts, and people were still using it. In spite of all the media attention, it was not even on Fox News and CNN about this one person. There are still people there using it. What can we do through TREC can it come from you?
Yeah, Doug.
Come what?
We're a consumer protection outfit. When are we gonna start protecting the consumer? That's a radical version of it, but why can't we do that? These county attorneys like mine are there.
What would you suggest we do? Sorry.
I have a direct approach to the county attorneys or the prosecuting authorities in these cases.
We have.
Well, we do that. We absolutely refer the highest profile and the largest cases to the county attorney or the district attorney. They're criminal misdemeanors. That's the biggest problem. If you want to make a change, the problem is, of course, the legislature has essentially said that unlicensed activity is a class
Hey.
Class C misdemeanor, whatever it is. It's the highest.
It's a class A.
Class A misdemeanor. So it's the highest.
State jail.
The next step up is a low-level felony, right? The legislature has never granted that to any licensing agent. So we are at the mercy of local law enforcement.
Now, I think Mike raised a good point when he said, if this is continuing and you have evidence of it, send it in, we'll file another complaint. One thing that may get the attention of the district attorney for Mike to be able to go back to him and says, look, he's still doing this. We find him, we've done everything. The consumer out there, especially you said there was some damage. Boy, evidence of that, anything that gives them something, the DA something to kind of sink their teeth into in terms of a case that's either going to give them good publicity or is broad enough and big enough that it's affecting more and more of the population.
And you can, I mean, the consumer, I mean.
And have the consumer file a police report as well.
Because if there's a face on it, the news does enjoy that as well. I mean, it doesn't mean that prosecutor's going to pick it up, but and honestly, we felt we could get, if we're talking about the same individual, as I assume it is, you know, they kind of sat on it for a little while, but, you know, they just said no. So.
Well, I even have a copy of their complaint form, so that should be in our system now.
Did they file a complaint?
Yeah, I have the copy of the form, dated 8/6 of this year.
So it's probably still being investigated then.
You'd have to show it to me.
It's because I instructed them to file a complaint.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Good.
Because they're putting up a license number on there that doesn't exist.
Yes,
It's right there.
Can the Real Estate Commission send an email to all the licensees, let them be aware of this guy, this inspector?
Like
Follow
a
your
mass
check advisor.
agents. Yeah.
Well, I mean, people read that email, I mean, I read that, but it's a general email out, and I get attention.
And
Yeah.
And just one question about, and I noticed there was a few failed to file a DBA, and it says by the buyer. And just, I'm kind of, was there any other complaint other than the DBA? Or
Well,
is,
usually no consumer knows the difference between a DBA or not. They file a complaint under other pretenses, and there wasn't evidence to support that, but when we do an investigation, we look at all
You look
scopes
at
of it
everything, right.
globally, so that was what we found, so we
That-
administered the appropriate
yeah,
punishment.
that's what I was curious about.
Yeah.
There were other things.
There's
that are
always a
not
lot of stuff, I mean,
substantiated. And this is
even
what-
on the formal disciplinary stuff, there could, I got a complaint in 2 weeks ago, they complained about 40 different issues, so.
Right.
It's,
See what sticks.
it could be.
Yeah. That's
I'm just saying, yeah, it's
good.
it's a global review overall anyhow, so.
Right, okay. That's what my question, thank you.
Tony, I'll just send it to you.
All right. Anything else?
No.
Thank you. Then education licensing services.
Should be that L1 report. Okay. The L1 report is the report that provides the number of applications received, licenses issued from those applications, and the renewal activity for a fiscal year. This chart is for fiscal year ending in August. You'll see that we have 33% increase in total original applications that we received. We have about a 10% increase in licenses that were issued from those original applications. We had a total of 833 renewals for that period. 73% of those renewals are from the renewal notices that were sent. 73% of them did renew. That's that 833 total that you've got there at the bottom.
Okay.
And the other thing to remember is that in comparison, that final total for renewals and comparing the 1,196 from last year, August, the reason there's such a, there's a discrepancy there is because they're on the 2-year renewal periods, and we have our highest number of renewals on our even numbered years.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we'll continue to see that.
Yeah, I was about to say, it says a negative 30%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those percentages that are next to those, that's the That's comparing apples to apples on that, is that what you're doing?
Yes, that, the percentage that's beside the number there shows that, for example, 73% of the renewal notices that were sent, 73%
Okay.
renewed.
It's really the right call.
That's a good.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's really just, it's the percentages.
What you do with the renewal notice?
They go out 90 days. The notice, renewal notices go out 90 days prior to the expiration date of the license. The next report gives you the total. We have total inspectors of 3,073 for fiscal year ending August. We had an increase in each category. 2,255 for active professional inspectors, 107 for real estate inspectors, and 118 for apprentice inspectors. So we've got a small increase there from last fiscal year.
But not a bunch.
No, not significant,
But
but
just kind of a rough number, that's 2,470 some odd inspectors that are active. Is that right?
yes.
2,480.
2,480.
Yeah.
It's 165.
That are active, out of the 3,000, okay.
And on the next report is a comparison of the inspector examination activity for the fiscal year. There was an increase in pass rates for the professional inspector this year over last year. First attempt pass rate was at 59% this year for the professional inspector versus 51% last year. Real estate inspector, those first attempt pass rates have dropped. Not sure why.
And that's the lowest one, 70%. Yeah.
Well, the professional inspector first.
How long's the passing score been down? Is that a year now, 2 years?
Well, no, historically, it's way up.
Yeah,
But since we switched exams,
No, he's saying lowered.
Well,
the-
they lowered the pay.
the
Lower the pass rate.
that's been 2 years.
Combination.
But you remember, that made no appreciable difference.
When it first happened.
So it's been longer than 2 years, it's been at least 3, because we did that and then we went to the national exam.
And Gwen, just out of curiosity, now that we're switching over to the new testing facility,
Yes.
there's probably not any numbers to share.
We don't have our numbers yet. I'm anticipating getting some numbers today. They're
Okay.
working on those reports for us
Okay,
for the month of September.
for the month of September, to see if there's any,
Any difference?
yeah, any differences, any
Yeah.
changes using the new testing. And I went through the Trek website looking for their guide, I guess you could say, their testing guide.
Mhm.
And I wasn't able to find it, and I may have been looking on the wrong spot, but I was having trouble finding the name of the testing facility and their guide.
If you go to the inspector tab, on the left sidebar, there should be a link to that CIB, to the candidate information brochure. If you look to the left.
Candidate information
Right, let's see
brochure.
what, it's
Did
still
you
got-
find it?
It still goes to
it's
PSI.
still connected to PSI. We need to get that changed. But do know that as we approve someone, as someone is eligible to take the exam, we send a letter to them via email, letting them know that they are eligible to take the exam, giving them Pearson VUE's information, Pearson VUE's telephone number, et cetera,
Mhm.
so that they contact Pearson VUE, and as well as Pearson VUE's email address.
Right. So
So we
you're
need to
gonna
update-
work with
yes,
them on
yeah.
that?
Mhm.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there anything else, Gwen?
No, that's all I have. If you all have any other questions?
Do you have any questions for Gwen? I know we have some agenda items that are coming up, so. Good. Then we'll go to subcommittee reports, and I'll just do it in the order that I wrote it down. So education, Steve?
We had a meeting on Tuesday. We had, I guess, 2 meetings since our last one. One in August and one on Tuesday. And I'm sure when you want to, I think it was
It's
very
just a
productive.
general report.
Yeah, generally, we're talking about how we're defining and talking about the new interactive training modules for the hands-on and how we're going to utilize it. And we've got some ideas on how to fix that.
Okay. Anything for the
We don't
next?
have any action. Nothing fresh.
It's an open meeting. Gotta leave the door open.
What's that?
So anything for the next agenda items? You know, next meeting's agenda, perhaps you can have anything that you want to?
I think we're continuing on that. We really need to define how we're wanting to utilize the interactive training and the hands-on,
Okay.
how to implement that.
Okay.
That's the biggest thing we've got going right now. That's it.
Okay, sounds good. Enforcement, Brad?
I've had enough subcommittee meetings and nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. And then the SOP subcommittee, Lee?
We met earlier this morning, basically just starting the review process, getting a list of categories and/or subjects to be up for discussion, and certainly open to new ones as we will start to progress in the review process.
Are you gonna start setting different subcommittee meetings other than just the one before this,
Mhm.
the general meeting, so you'll start setting
Eventually.
that?
Eventually, I think we're going to get kind of our categories and a good base of the things we want to really start talking about. Of course, it'll always expand from there, but we want to get a good base, and then we'll probably separate those out into categories and have meetings based on those categories to try and keep our focus simple. But
Okay.
yeah, we'll probably start having some more meetings as that progresses.
Anything else? All right, so we'll go to number 7. Discussion and possible action regarding the proposed amendments to 22 TAC 353, subchapter 4, results from the agency's 4-year review. 535, thank you. And we have this on here for,
This is essentially on here because these changes that you see, or that were part of the materials, were proposed at the last commission meeting. And so they'll be up for adoption at the November meeting, and we wanted the inspector committee to be able to look at them to see if there is anything that they needed to bring to our attention that needed to be changed prior to the adoption.
did everybody have a chance to review these?
Well, and you may recall that the committee has considered all of these previously and recommended all of these changes to the commission, which is why they were proposed at the
Right.
last commission meeting.
This is just to give you guys another
Any
chance
comments
to.
received? Usually this is one of them.
There have been no comments received. on
No
the rules.
comments
Yes,
received.
sir. Thanks, Gary.
And just for edification purposes and to help me better understand it, on E, it's on page 3, E2 and 3, and there are some military credit or exemptions. Can you kind of just explain that to me a little bit?
Page 3 of 15.
Yeah, 3 of 15, on the second column, number 2 and number 3.
Those
Six of the
are,
25.
that language is a result of statutory language. There was a bill passed last session, and I believe one the session before that, dealing with expedited license for military members. And that, I don't recall if that was just not put in the inspector, because it was put in the real estate
Yeah, I
rules
don't
last time.
recall seeing
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
so
it
it
did.
applies to,
It
it
wasn't
applies to all
included.
occupational licenses, so it should, even though in practice, I'm sure if we had gotten an application, we would have done it, the rule needed to be put in place.
Right.
So,
Can you explain it to me then? Do they get credit for military experience, or
Well, this,
are they bypassing?
Reciprocity.
well, E2 is simply a residency provision and simply notes that by entering military service, you don't lose your residency status as a Texas resident.
Right.
And that would be maintained upon your separation.
Go down to the next page to D, credit for
D,
military
credit,
service.
credit to military
C
service.
is extra.
The
D is
commission
where
shall
credit's
credit
at.
any verifiable military service, training, or education.
They still have to go through the process of submitting that to us and having the staff look at it and make sure it is applicable.
So
in one way or
like any
another.
other experience from any other person.
So the
Yes,
process
exactly.
remains the same, but it's
Exactly.
expedited.
It's just-
Got it.
Yeah, exactly.
They get put on the top of the stack.
That's right.
They do. They do.
This is February.
I have no problem.
Yes.
with it.
Yeah, But it's the same process as anyone, the
No, it's state
experience.
too.
State.
will
I
be-
have
State
no
law.
problem
Federal.
with any of this.
Yeah.
From state,
okay.
so
Well, but the state
also has.
provisions that
Okay.
give preference to military
I
veterans.
raised 2 Marines.
Credit for the
Yeah,
military service.
yeah.
Does that speak well?
Yeah, they're tough. All right. So is there any recommended changes or anything for this? So there's no motions that are necessary for this particular one. We have, Donna, you did put down something on 7 for public comment, and Stan, you put something down on this one for public comment.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Okay. And Mike Cothran, you just kind of left it open, as you're gonna talk on all of them?
With all
Yeah.
general. I just actually had a question, because I was
Good.
reviewing these.
I apologize, but you'll have to.
Mike Cothran, I'm sorry, Mike Cothran. This is in regards to 535.213, the newer verbiage, page 6 of 15 or 9 of 25, depending. A says that the approval of qualifying real estate inspection instructors is, you can go back to 535.63 to get these, but when I did, 535.63 doesn't have them in it either, so I was wondering if that was maybe a misprint.
Are you looking, you're looking at the current rules?
This is what I just pulled off the website
Yeah,
last time.
these are all proposed together at one thing. So the new proposed rules for education instructors, education in general, apply to instructors, providers, and courses for both inspectors and real estate license holders.
But they're
So
new proposals.
They're under proposal, so you would need to look at the proposed version of 535.63 to
Not the
see
existing.
that that's in there, not the existing rules.
It's not terribly transparent, you know that, right?
Well, they're all posted at the same time.
Over at
It's
the
all been-
Secretary of State's, yeah.
No, they're on our
And they're on
website.
the
They're on our
website.
They're now?
website. They are on our website.
Okay, when did they get on there, by the way? 'Cause
Right after they're
After
usually.
I talked to you?
No, right, they're usually on there.
They're actually on the materials for the commission meeting,
Okay.
and they're
Oh.
posted before the commission
Yeah.
meeting.
Well, you recall you directed me to the SOS site.
Well, maybe I misunderstood what your
No, it
question
was there,
was.
it was there, I just wasn't able to find it on the website. All right, so
proposed
we're
draft is
changing
there.
things that are changed and referencing
On the
them
track
to
side.
things.
Yeah.
All we've done is consolidate the requirements for education providers, instructors, and courses under one section
It's
of
a
the rules to apply to
conspiracy.
both, to apply, because they're a license type, just like real estate inspectors are, just like brokers are, just like they're a separate license type. So that portion of the rule applies to them regardless of the type of education.
No, I understand what you're doing, we're trying to hurry up and do this thing and get it all taken care of. But it isn't transparent to the, somebody looking from the outside, Mr. Wilcox.
Yeah, this, and just kind of this was actually a directive. They were going to kind of keep it together, and we asked for them to separate it and put it all in the inspector's area. So that's basically all that's happened, is it's been pulled out of one area, and now it's moving to just the inspector's area. So you won't have to keep flipping back and forth between the realtor side and the inspector side. So
It's all under the instruction section.
yeah, it's all under the instruction.
That's actually, yeah, okay, with that caveat, I
Yeah,
will
if
go with
you're
that,
in-
because it's not specifically in inspectors, it is in another section.
No, it's an instructor, so an instructor
Right.
license holder can look at one point in the rule and not have to flip all over the
So
place.
it's in
to
the
find it.
education area.
Right.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Any other comment, Mike?
No, sir.
Thank you.
For the license holders.
And that's all we have on number 7. So since there's no recommended changes, we don't need to have a motion or anything. So discuss, agenda item number 8, discussion possible action regarding the experience recommendations under 535212 F and G. And it's agenda item number 8. Carrie, did you have something on this one?
Well, I think this is either Kristen or Steve's.
Do you want to read off or do you want?
This was a result of their
Does-
subcommittee meeting, so if you want to.
One question, does this reflect our,
What you're looking at now does not.
okay, doesn't reflect what we were thinking on Tuesday of cutting the hours?
What I sent to the committee members via email that Tony has on the screen
Okay.
is what the consolidation of everything the committee talked about and discussed
Okay.
on Tuesday.
So it's all in here?
It's not part of the
It's not
materials that
in
were
the
posted, but she
materials.
sent
It's
them
the
an
email
email.
that
address.
You
I
can
sent
Because I have
to
the
you.
materials off.
This
So
is the
Kristen,
But
way.
it's
why
on-
don't
it's
you-
up here on
why
the
don't you
spot.
present
Good
what
enough.
the proposal is that Tony has up on
Yeah,
the
this
screen.
is-
Tony, I would recommend that you let G
Okay.
go through the language that the committee wanted you to draft and what you did in-house.
Basically, the committee, when they met, the education subcommittee, when they met on Tuesday, considered changes to Rule 535.212, in particular to subsections F and G of that rule, related to how an applicant can satisfy the substitute experience component of their education. As Tony has put up.
Continuing education?
No.
No, initial education for licensure.
The field work
The field work
component of the substitute experience requirement.
The idea was attacking the problem of the rural areas where applicants may not have the ability to find a sponsoring inspector.
And under subsection G, and F2, a person has essentially 3 options to complete this component of their education, of their experience, to obtain a license. The first option would remain unchanged under the subcommittee's proposal. It would require 40 hours of field work through ride-along inspection courses. And those courses may include up to 10 students per session.
Excuse me there.
And then they would also need to
Demon City.
obtain 24 hours of
Correct.
interactive experience training modules. That is not correct.
This
So
one
you-
doesn't
Right.
have.
It
the
doesn't
three
have to
buttons.
strike.
Through the
They're,
approved classroom.
The last sentence.
yes.
Classroom or,
Also take up classroom work.
just say approved
There you go.
interactive experience training.
Right, of approved interactive experience training modules.
That's correct.
And then under the second option, the committee recommended a change to mirror the first option. And basically, the hours of field work through ride-along inspection course sessions are reduced to 16 hours. And the interactive experience training module increased to 60 hours.
And reduced to 10 students. From 20 students to 10.
Right. Well, that's the same as the.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure everybody understood that.
Sure. The committee maintained the option 3 the same, and an applicant has a third option to satisfy this experience component by completing 120 hours of approved interactive experience training modules with no hours of ride-along inspections. The only modification to this option is that the committee recommended extending the deadline to March 1st of 2016.
And then the definition of
Yeah.
And then the committee has proposed in subsection H, a definition of interactive experience training module. And essentially this definition was taken, or is based on a definition of distance education from the U.S. Department of Education. And it allows inspectors to continue to satisfy this through correspondence, but it does put some restrictions on the correspondence to emphasize the interactive activity between the students and the instructor. So they can satisfy this through in-person attendance in a classroom or using one or more of the following technologies. The internet, essentially option 2 is video conferencing or online activities. Option 3 is audio conferencing. And then option 4 is video cassettes, DVDs, and CD-ROMs, as long as those are used in conjunction with one of the other technologies.
To where they have access to a lot of instruction.
Is that perfectly clear? So the three ways, you know, our emphasis a couple years ago was to get more hands-on with the ride-along. So we put in the option, we lowered the hours. If you do the ride-along, 40 hours, basically take a week of your life and go do 40 hours with somebody, and then you have some classroom and stuff. If you couldn't do 40 hours, option 2 was 2 days, 16 hours, but it ups the interactive. And then the third option is, you know, similar to the old fast track where it's all classroom interactive. And we gave an incentive, the incentive on the second one to at least go, instead of just ruling out ride-along, okay, a couple of days of ride-along, and the incentive is we're going to cut the classroom hours down from 80 to 60 to do a couple of days worth of interactive at least.
It also keeps
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
the third option is extended until 2016 to allow the first two to
Catch
get
up.
beefed up and online.
and at least it keeps us from just sending people DVDs and
Yes.
saying you've got your interactive stuff. There has to be some interaction.
I get my Betamax tape and watch it.
And Steve, you discussed the qualifications for instructors that we just need to have one basic.
That's a whole nother discussion based on, I think
I don't
everybody.
think it is, because under 3, we have the, under.
What is it? Well,
B3.
the line was added. Well, this
Right.
one is just presented by a
That's what-
professional inspector.
But
and
we
that-
need to have the same standard for all instructors.
Well,
Do we want to, yeah.
I mean, I don't
Right.
know if we want to open that question up now, or if there are any questions about the changes that were made to the hours and the courses, because there does need to be a discussion about the instructor qualifications for each option.
Well, Kristen, I think, yeah, that's the reason, is because I don't think we can act on this till we correct our language about the instructors.
Okay.
And just so everybody knows, this will be a new proposal when you recommend it to the commission, so any changes.
Because
you
there's
wanna make-
stuff going through already.
This was not
This is-
proposed.
Oh, okay.
There was
This is
no
not okay.
changes to 212 proposed.
So
Okay.
any changes that this committee wants to make to this rule, you should make all at the same time before you bring it to the commission to propose it, and then we'll go through the rulemaking process.
We need to clean up the stuff about educators when we do this. Translation.
Now, or
Yeah.
you need
Now.
another subcommittee?
Yeah.
Well, the only,
Unless
if this
unless
looks,
there's a problem with it from the full committee, I think we're done in substance.
if the F and G, the F.
I know, I'm trying to pick every time.
If the two paragraphs F and G seem like they're acceptable.
Tony, you're a good Catholic.
Get that
lawyer.
down.
The only other question is defining who can instruct those classes. And right now, based on the email we got, there's 3 different kinds. There's instructors for sponsoring, there's instructors for ride-along, and then we've kind of pointed to somebody who can instruct here. We kind of believe there should be just one qualification for an instructor, for inspectors.
Same
And
thing
it's
for
the same.
sponsoring.
You apply to be an
5 years,
inspector.
200 professional instructor.
Yeah, you can, once you apply to be an instructor for an inspector, you can sponsor, you can do ride-alongs, and you can do this.
Just keep it consistent.
Yeah, it cuts down headaches for staff too.
Basically, what Steve and Fred are referring to is that under option 3, the highlighted language requires the interactive experience training modules to be presented or taught by a licensed professional inspector. So that language imposes that standard only on option 3. For options 1 and 2, there are 2 components of each of those options. One is the ride-along component, and the second is the interactive experience training module. In the instructor rule under 535.63, there are 2 different standards. There is
As this is the proposed.
yes.
Can you blow that
Well,
up?
and the
This is
language
current.
isn't
Carrying
different.
forward
It's
what you
the
had
same, it's the
previously.
existing. It's under,
This is the way it is now?
yes, this is the way it is now. It's simply being moved to a different location.
Right? Yep.
Yes, under
A and B.
3, under subsection 3, if you'll highlight all of section 3, no, just 3, A and B. There you go. To be approved as a ride-along instructor, you have to have at least 5 years of licensure as a professional inspector. And you have to have performed a minimum of 200 real estate inspections as a professional inspector, or have 3 years of experience teaching or training, or I'm sorry, sponsoring trainees or other inspectors. So you could sponsor apprentices or licensed inspectors. So that's the standard for a ride-along instructor. Basically, 5 years professionally licensed inspector and either 200 real estate inspections or 3 years of teaching experience. And then if you'll go up,
How do you get to be a teacher if you can't instruct? What's your teaching experience?
It doesn't have
it doesn't have to be
in
an inspector's
inspection teaching.
inspection teaching, just teaching in general.
But my question is, I'm an inspector and I want to be a teacher. Where do I get teaching experience if I can't teach? Do I go teach kindergarten, or can I count Sunday school?
There's an or.
You can.
There's an or.
See,
at the
right
end
here.
of
I
A.
understand, but I'm
No,
asking
it's
a
the
really
or.
serious question. If I don't have the other qualifications, but I could show 3 years, how do I ever get experience teaching?
Another
I
field?
just see that it contradicts.
Or you,
No, they don't.
No, it
you can
doesn't.
teach elementary school for.
That's what I
You
said.
could, you could teach
Sunday school
English as a
count?
second language. I mean, you could teach English
Well,
classes.
actually,
But
you
how's that-
can't.
but
It
how's
would
that qualify
probably
you to
be
be a
a
ride-along
better
instructor?
qualification.
It's simply to get,
Sunday school.
to
They're all
have
prison, but-
teaching
Sunday school.
experience.
Well, I
Okay.
guess my problem is
Homeschool.
if by that, you don't necessarily have to have the experience in the inspection industry.
Yes,
Well,
you
yeah,
do.
right
You
here.
have to have
You have to
5
have 5
years
years.
as a
See,
licensed
this is
inspector.
and.
5 years
So it's
Okay, I
and.
thought it was or.
It's 5 years
And.
plus.
This is the or.
The or is simply whether you've performed the 200 inspections or 3 years of teaching experience. So that's the standard for
Or sponsoring.
teaching or sponsoring. The teaching experience, if you're sponsoring, then you're teaching.
Yeah, I kind of know why we did that, but as I sit and look at it, I kind of go, it's kind of foolish, because if you struck me, you haven't really lost anything.
You notice he says that a lot about rules he writes?
I know.
Well, I remember why we did this,
We just
Brian.
follow him
You
down
were
a
here.
rabbit hole.
Brian, you were here, so you should remember too.
So we're talking about just cleaning that up, making
Yeah,
it
but when you
simple.
come back and look at it, you go, okay, if you've been a licensed inspector for 5 years and you hadn't performed 200 inspections, you shouldn't really be teaching.
You're
That's-
part-time.
Yeah, that's kind of my other.
And if you're sponsoring trainees or inspectors and you hadn't done 200 inspections in 5 years, I wonder how many people you really sponsor in their training. So,
And should you be teaching ride-along?
3
Okay.
years worth of sponsoring.
yeah.
This
Well, we're
is
But
not
you haven't done
Rewrite the-
200 inspections.
If you want to consider rewriting this rule, then, it's not moving forward today. You need to go back to
Let's
7.
go back to.
No, okay,
Yeah.
we'll hold it for a later time.
Well, we're
Okay.
ready to fix this.
so.
But, well, I think we're going
Well,
to address it anyway, because go to the
we're-
rule for
you
sponsoring
can fix it in
inspectors.
212.
It's different.
This is the standard for ride-along. The general standard for instructors, if you'll move up in this to, I believe it is
Management inspection approval.
B1. So you have to have honesty, trustworthy, and integrity. And you have to demonstrate competency in the subject matter. And to demonstrate the competency, you have to have either a college degree in the subject area or 5 years of professional experience in the subject area and 3 years of experience in teaching or training. So that is how generally instructors are approved. So without any additional language in 212, an instructor of an interactive experience training module would have to satisfy these requirements. That is, they would have to have 5 years of professional experience or a college degree in the subject area.
Is that you, Fred?
And 3 years.
And 3 years of teaching or training.
So I think the question that's trying to be answered here today in terms of 212 is, do you want the instructors for the interactive training module to have the same qualifications that you require for the instructor of the ride-along?
Or for any other education
Wait.
course.
But we also have a standard for sponsorship of apprentices.
Right.
What's that standard? Because I don't remember it exactly. It's 5 years experience.
200.
200 inspections, but that's it.
So I think that's why y'all picked this
I-
originally.
Yeah.
Well,
If
yeah.
I
For the ride
recall-
alongs, yeah.
If I recall correctly, I don't think there's a 5-year experience in that one. It's
No.
just 200.
200
inspections.
Well, yeah, because when we first started, nobody had 5 years' experience as a licensee, because we just got licensed.
Yeah, if you're
We've been-
sponsoring,
yeah.
you just have to be a professional inspector with 200 inspections.
200 inspections.
But there isn't a 5-year requirement.
No.
I'm looking. I don't think there is. I think you're right.
I don't think there's anything, I think it's
It's
200
you.
inspections.
That's recorded.
A college degree in the subject area gives you enough experience to be able to.
So what is the education subcommittee recommending here?
Our preference would be to define one inspector, instructor, and it would qualify for everything. And the caveat would be the additional endorsement to do the ethics class. But that the basic instructor would be able to do ride-alongs, interactive, sponsoring, just one, yeah, just one, I mean, and that would make it simple. I
And
mean,
then-
unless we see a need
Then
to
what
have
is
a
your
lesser
recommended
one.
qualification requirements then?
What is the requirement?
What would be
Well,
your recommendation?
when I got the email yesterday, I was thinking of some way of blending those three together and coming up with a common denominator that would be palatable to everybody here. And everybody got the email yesterday. Do we have that up there?
Well, the,
The three,
Back to the hall.
the.
Do you have a written recommendation already?
no,
No, we
just
don't
got
have
it
the
yesterday.
email.
I just saw
We
it
have-
yesterday and in my mind, I was
Which-
thinking.
The
What
suggestion,
we're calling that.
you don't have the email. It's the email that I sent out to the committee. I mean,
Can-
you have it
can-
on email.
We're talking about something
But
not in writing.
Which I
It's-
don't think I got it.
Can I make a suggestion for the expediency purpose, if we want to go forward with this rule?
Yes.
Just relate it back to this standard for all instructors under that F and G section. Just,
Well,
anybody
if you-
teaching has got to be
okay.
approved under
If-
that.
An
It-
approved instructor for 212, and then you can work on this
Then we'll
over
work on the
You
rest
time.
can
of it
work on
later.
this
Right.
later, but the current standard in 212 for option E is that you have to be a licensed professional, I'm sorry, option 3, you have to be a licensed professional inspector to teach the interactive experience training module. So I don't know if you want to just keep that as the standard for teaching the interactive experience training module, or
So-
if you want to simply say that you have to meet this requirement, and then you can work on changing this requirement at a later date.
Right,
It
that's
says
what I said.
presented by a licensed professional inspector. So
And-
are you referring to a TREC licensed professional
That's
inspector?
how it's always been interpreted.
But that could be a
Yes.
brand new inspector.
It
But-
could be a
but we
brand
don't
new,
need
and
that.
we have had that, but.
You can strike that.
Well, here's the thing. That was what was carried forward that's going away originally this March, but now for another year. So if we kept it in to keep the status quo while everybody else comes up to speed on the other two options, you might want to do that. You can change it, but then the existing courses that maybe, and I believe Stan's program is this way, because you've only been licensed, what, for 1 year? A little over a year as a Texas, so.
2 years, still about a year.
So the status quo, and he may not be the only one, I'm just saying, if you wanted to keep that third option, just to keep the status quo for another year, then I wouldn't change it. If you want to keep that third option and beef it up sooner, then you're going to have some issues with some current programs that are going to have to find new instructors. But that's your choice. It's from a policy perspective.
So basically, this section 3 here is going to go away at the end of March 2016 anyway.
Correct.
Correct, yes.
All right, as long as it's going away.
So we could leave that
Leave it
there
as
and
it
just let
is.
it sunset itself in another
The
year.
way
And that's what it was intended to
presented
do,
by
is
a
to
licensed
sunset
professional
itself.
instructor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the end, by that time, the people doing that, to Satisfy Interactive, which is also on the first two, will have the experience up to probably meet
The
the other standards. Because they'll have the years of teaching, the options.
Well, option 1 and 2 would default to what is in 63. So
Right.
there's no changes
Because you
needed.
can't teach a course unless you're an approved
Correct.
instructor. So you
Correct.
have to be on one of the 2 levels. Now, marrying those 2 into one standard is something you can work on over time,
Okay.
if you want to.
We're good with that.
Clear as mud?
Are you good with that, Brett?
So right now, I'm just gonna do this graphically. Scroll down just a little bit, so I can reach it. Okay. So, for option 1,
I got option 1.
okay, you're doing ride-along, it has to be you have to be a qualified ride-along instructor, and you're teaching interactive experience training module, you have to be an approved instructor. Okay, an approved instructor under the existing standard. Same for 2. Okay, so under 3, there's only the experience training module, but you don't have to be an approved instructor, you simply have to be a licensed professional inspector.
And we just,
That's
For
the
now.
way it sits
That's the way
today.
it's been.
as long as
Okay,
we
that's the way
can
it
For
has
now.
been.
accept that for a
And if
year.
you wanna change
Yeah.
it,
We
you
have
wanna
an end
change
date.
it in the future, you have obviously until this sunsets to change this. If this goes away, then you still have your 2 different levels of, you have a ride-along instructor and a regular instructor.
Why is there a recommendation to drop it from 80 to 60? Just out of curiosity.
To maintain the same ratio.
40 to 24.
Ratio is, it's
16 to
2.5 times the difference between,
Somebody actually did the math on that.
yes.
Well, and the difference was in this one, they went from a live interactive webinar, which they didn't feel was quite as comparable to an actual ride-along, to an actual ride-along hour.
Consistent, that
Okay.
balance.
And
Trying
the
to
interactive
relate.
So
can
they thought
include
that
both.
if they're doing that, they needed to be proportional in the other hours.
All right.
So I would say leave 3.
Leave it for
And
now.
just-
We know
Because
there's
it'll
an
go
end
away
date.
on its own.
Yes.
Mhm.
And it gives us the time
To really look.
get those 3 different qualifications and kind of zip
To be
them along.
aligned together.
And you're not gonna make any, and so at the bottom of this, there was additional, so
Definition.
this defines
Defines
the
interactive.
Yes.
Which is something that has been missing all along. So I think that that's a very.
Very
good addition.
confusing. We were
Yeah, as usual.
But that wording's straight from
took it from
Department of Ed.
the Department
It's
of
based on
Education.
it.
With some
It's based
adjustments.
on it. We've adjusted it slightly to emphasize that it is demonstrative education, and that it requires interaction between the student and the instructor, using one
It's
of
Halloween,
the
I had to look at
tech-
that.
technology
Which one?
options.
Demonstrative.
Demonstrative.
He liked that word.
Has nothing to do with
Nothing to do with
monsters.
monsters.
Yeah, I know Halloween's this one, so I just, she learned that one, wanted to throw it out and see it. Sorry.
It's a good word. It's a good word.
All right, keep it lighthearted. Good.
So this is good the way it is presented.
And then later on, you're gonna work on.
The only, well, the only,
instructor
the only
portion of stuff.
I guess the thing from here that we want to attack is, do we want to merge the qualifications for ride-along and the instructor? Do we want,
Do you want to do that right now until you adjust the other instructor? That is a question.
because right now we have rider-along defined and we got instructor defined. You just want to leave those
What I
alone
heard
and
is
look?
they were just gonna let this sunset in 2000.
Well, that's for the third.
For the
option.
option.
You still have two different qualifications for ride-along and for the classroom
We
instructor.
know we want the same qualifications, right?
We can look at that in the next subcommittee and see,
Either way you wanna do it.
Next time.
before you sunset.
Are you sunsetting? Riding off into?
Absolutely.
Until you
Okay,
find a
February.
replacement's what we want, right?
He's not getting his haircut until he gets on.
Okay.
They don't have your
So
replacement.
that's your
ready.
recommendation?
That's my recommendation as presented on that slide.
Okay. Have a motion?
Move to adopt.
Got a second?
Second.
So now we'll open it up for comments. I know you've already been commenting on it.
You meant move to recommend proposal
Recommend,
to the
yeah.
commission. That's what I thought.
Well, yeah, we have.
Verbal shorthand.
Move to recommend.
John Cahill's
Never
gonna cut in line here, and he's going to go to agenda number 8. Do you have a comment?
I don't have any comment.
On this one?
Not this one.
Okay, Donna? Agenda number 8?
No, she won't have.
Stan?
But I do, yeah.
Okay. Well, you were next.
I really appreciate all the hard work the subcommittee, education subcommittee's put in on this. It's taken a lot of thought. Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
Come over
Well, you
here.
can come over here if you want to, it's just you were standing in front of the camera.
Seen and heard.
Fred the camera in.
State your name. But, Stan Harbuck.
I get that good shine off of you.
Better School and Building Inspection. I really appreciate all the work, and I know that you even did some more hours after that meeting on Wednesday, it sounds like, because there wasn't.
Kristen did.
Yeah.
Kristen did.
Staff did.
Staff did. Because the definition wasn't hammered out in the meeting on Wednesday. I don't know why, I guess I misunderstood, but I had the impression that the definition would be hammered out over several meetings in the future. So, it's, I don't know, I'm looking at the definitions, because this is the first time that we've had a chance to see them, so I apologize. I wish we'd had more time to sort of digest the material and the possible issues here, but as a general rule, I think it looks good, but I'm looking back at all the many hours and meetings that the Education Subcommittee went through to try to define options 1, 2, and 3 and some of these kinds of definitions that were related to it, including the concept that this has to be an IDEC approved, course at the time. A lot of discussion on that, both in the Education Subcommittee as well as this full committee. And I don't see being an approved IDEC instructor and having submitted courses to IDEC before, I don't see those principles in this definition.
Try.
So, pardon me?
You don't.
You don't, okay. So, but I thought there was a lot of emphasis on that. So I guess, I apologize for, I don't want to put a monkey wrench in your process, because I know you want to try to get this out sooner rather than later. But I would just ask that the committee reconsider and allow this to be put on the table for some future education subcommittee meetings, as far as the definition goes, at least anyway, because I'm not sure there's a lot there. I'm not sure how all that interrelates, and in certain circumstances, what it might be interpreted to mean. So, I don't know. Anyway, this is the first time I've seen it, so I have to apologize. But if I had a little more time to absorb it and think it through, it would be a little easier for me to comment on it. But
This is the definition, we based it for the edification of those here not in the subcommittee. This is the U.S. Department of Education's definition, and it seemed to fit very well. And since it's a published, known, certainly well out there standard, it was pretty well adopted to go through. And the process of this filling in of these rules has actually gone extraordinarily slowly. to allow for everyone's input and to not make radical changes that would damage the inspector program and the educational system. And we have made every tolerance for everything that could possibly be tolerated to continue on, because we do recognize that the marketplace is not going to support radical changes. So we've also discussed future goals and future tightening, but there's a realization that those have to be done over time when the market can support it. So that's basically what happened. It is, again, it's been out there for a long time, so they just seem to fit very well.
No, I understand. Another question I would have, for instance, I have a question about audio conferencing for an experience module.
You can send out your videotapes, your courseware, everything else, but you're available by phone to answer questions.
Right, but that's a standalone audio conferencing.
No, it's a standalone. If you go to
In
item 4,
conjunction.
it says in conjunction with 1, 2, and 3 above.
No, I'm not talking about DVDs or CD-ROMs. I'm talking about someone that wants to teach the experience module as only an audio conference.
They could do it.
They can do that.
Okay,
That's-
without any visuals at all? We're
They can do
talking
it.
about
The
field
way-
training oriented type, and we're gonna let somebody talk about something on the phone or in an audio conference without showing any scenes from out on site and so forth.
Imagine being in a classroom, closing your eyes and listening to the teacher read.
I agree, but I think a lot of those classrooms do include scenes from out on site, and that's
Some do.
part of it.
Not all
Okay.
of them.
You can have both.
Right.
You
not
can have both.
restricting.
It's not
It's not
restricted.
restricted, you can have both.
You
But
can
again,
combine
this-
all of them if you
This
want.
is a step, Stan,
Uh-huh.
and it'll be further refined, but it is allowable.
So, the way you're delivering now fits this category.
Yes, it does. I agree. And,
Okay.
but I just, you know.
Do you want us to shoot you in the foot?
No. I'm just nervous about adopting something that hasn't been as broadly discussed as what was been put together heretofore. You know?
It has been broadly discussed, Stan, and
Yeah.
it's been a huge part of the discussion is various ways to include, not exclude, but to move the system forward,
Right.
and to not cut anybody out who's doing it and trying to progress.
Right.
And this seems to open all those doors. I didn't find one that we really closed
Yeah.
when I read through this.
Keep in mind also, this is just gonna go through the regular rule process. If they recommend it for proposal, it will be proposed.
So
it'll be
9 months
published.
from
You'll
now.
have comments that can be submitted that will come back to the committee to discuss, make any refinements, make those recommendations to the commission. It's a process, and then the commission can consider for final adoption. So it's just the beginning of the process.
And it's in addition to the 16 or 40 hours of ride-along, so it's not the only thing they're gonna have.
Right.
And
Well,
Stan,
this
the
will
way
be
no, this will be item
120
3.
hours.
For the
120.
next year.
Correct.
But
For
looking
one
in the
more year.
future,
120 hours of this, but the one thing that I think is, that wasn't brought out well enough in that objection, and I apologize, is that this is education that demonstrates the application of inspector standards of practice in those sections, okay? So the content has to be, okay, I learned all this, I know all about electricity and all that kind of stuff. Now I have to demonstrate the application of that knowledge to specific circumstances. And it has to be interactive, regular and substantive interaction. So you're right, Stan, I absolutely believe that you would not be able to, that we would not approve a complete audio, even audio only, even if it was, listening to an instructor without demonstrating the application of inspector standards of practice. So we have all the SOPs in there, all the things you have to do, and you gotta demonstrate them. That's what that education is. Well, it's the same, this is the substitute for riding along with you, okay?
Doug,
It's substitute.
B
for that.
says one or more of the following technology.
Correct.
And staff certainly has the right to limit that as they see fit.
Is delivered,
Right.
right, it is, this is the content,
Right.
these are the delivery methodologies.
Correct.
You gotta have both.
You do, and you are charged with seeing that it does fulfill those requirements.
Correct.
Correct.
Correct, that would be correct.
Yes.
Right.
so you still have to interact with them and use these other things.
What you do now, right, Glenn?
If it was just audio conferencing, she's not gonna approve it.
Right, because it's gotta meet all of those
Right.
elements, that's a good point.
But if it was a giant book of examples and audio conferencing, that could work.
Maybe.
Or videos or whatever, that kind of, and audio conferencing.
I liked it.
And Stan, that 120 stays in place till March 1 of 2016.
Oh, the currently approved stay in place
Till March 1, 2016.
Good time to work on.
So you got a year and a half,
Right, okay.
right?
Okay.
Okay.
And Brian's
Well, I
intended
think
is to be a hard deadline.
What?
I don't know that it's achieved.
If we define it
Right.
now,
The committee.
then once it becomes approved, it would have to comply with that even option 3.
So we'll have time unless we put another,
Ed, Doran, you were on 9. You're passing on this.
the effective date for that, but we still have 6 months of rulemaking.
Right.
John Cahill,
You want me still on 8?
we're still on 8.
Hi, I'm John Cahill from Plano. I've followed these rules ever since their creation back in '92, and my concern is that the educational regulation process, when I compare this agency to other agencies, it's extremely complex to me. There are so many, like, if you do this, you can do that, but if you can do this and you can do that, with this exception and that. I find the core educational requirements extremely complex, but at the same time, I understand why you might want to create syllabus outlines and course approvals for a core class. My concern on this is the possible tie-in in this into agenda item 9, because my main problem is, right now, I understand the core education process is complex, but I believe that the continuing education process is just completely unnecessary. It's blocking out huge amounts of educational opportunities through corporate providers who are just not going to apply to Trek to get their courses approved. Simpson, Strong Time, Pentair, Pool Pumps.
We're still on 8 right now.
Yeah, so I'll bring that up later, but my concern is that the tie-in with this to number 9.
Okay. Thank you, John. That was all the public comments we have.
one more. So this would have that same day?
You need to stand up and introduce yourself.
Donna Hardwick, they're still building inspection. Just wondering from this discussion right here, this would have the same effective date, that this
The
would
March.
start after 2016?
I think that one stays in place.
That's not what the rule proposed.
That's not the way the rule's
It would,
written.
when it gets adopted, 20 days after it's adopted by the commission, it would be in effect for all interactive training modules, experience training modules.
The 130 would go, or the 120 would go away, number 3 would go away, but you can use that module for that 60 hours. The 16-hour ride along with the 60 hours.
But I think it's still, the 120 would still, that definition of what an interactive experience training module applies to all of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in essence, Gwen hasn't approved any strict correspondence courses under the interactive training module, which has been the language all along. There has been a DVD, I think that's the only, a couple of programs and videos in the past. But mostly they've been classroom to date, which is what you would expect for an interactive hands-on, so.
Right.
Just making clear that it would apply.
I guess that's the plan. Will we have to change anything until 2016?
That's personal discussion.
If this rule became in effect, you would have to add an interactive component to your current 120-hour course.
If it doesn't already have one.
Well, we do
If
have.
it doesn't have one.
Yeah, well, we do have email correspondence, and then.
Which is one of them.
Right.
Also, internet would be email, okay.
That's,
So you could check it
It's on the
out
list.
individually with concern.
First one, and we can clarify that through the rule proposal process in Congress. Really, any specific thing that you want to propose, we can try to opine whether or not it fits within the rules, or do we need to amend the rules, or that kind of stuff.
Thank you, sorry to distract.
Good?
What is it, 5 years?
So we had a motion and a second. Those four?
Eight.
Aye.
Hey, yeah, 4.
Greg? Yes. Any opposed?
Greg speaks.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And that'll take us to number 9. Discussion and possible action regarding requirements for correspondence course delivery method. Yeah.
Carrie Lewis, I just want to give this committee an update of what happened at the last ESAC meeting, because I think it is important to this topic. The inspectors committee already recommended that their correspondence course delivery as a delivery method continue. So that is what was in the proposed rules. The as to real estate portion of the courses, ESAC had recommended doing away or phasing out correspondence courses at the end of 2015.
Completely?
Completely. They have, at their last meeting, decided to pull back on that based on a lot of comments that were received and suggestions for, rather than eliminating it, putting more effort into fixing it and looking for specific, where the weaknesses are and addressing the specific problems and coming up with some standards. So what they're doing at this point is they are going to recommend that correspondence courses stay as they currently are with just a few clarifying definitional tweaks to accreditation standards. I'll talk about that in a minute if you want. But they're going to form a work group that includes providers and representatives from colleges and universities, as well as, I think, 4 or 5 committee members from ESAC. And I think they would like a representative from this body, because it's gonna, it dovetails what you're doing. You're looking at what standards should correspondence courses have to be effective and give the quality that we want. So that's going to be going forward. It's not going to be an immediate process. I think their first meeting's in December, and they're going to take input over several different meetings over several months, maybe 4 or 5 months, and come up with a very thoughtful, concise recommendation that they could bring both to this body and to ESAC as to what they think would be appropriate requirements for correspondence courses.
Are they open to having a member from the inspectors committee?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's a work group. It's not a work group on just one type of course or another. It's on delivery method and what requirements should we have to improve the delivery of education for this agency. So they would definitely welcome that. If you want to assign somebody or somebody wants to volunteer, I can pass that name along to the committee chair of ESAC.
Well, our education committee chair, subcommittee chair is Steve.
Would you be interested in?
Oh, yeah.
Let me put it this way, see, it'll save you doing a lot of the same work yourself.
It's either that or Disneyland.
It's all about the experience.
I will be happy to go, but he needs to represent, because I'm out of here. So.
Okay. But you have
Short
the,
timer.
so you would also be interested in, or you
Okay,
can,
I will
you
just
can
go.
attend, you won't
Yeah, I
be
just
on the
want to
committee,
attend.
okay.
So Steve, if you let me know when the meetings are.
Well, Gary, can I ask a question about that?
Seriously.
In all this delivery method about correspondence courses, distance learning, I haven't read or seen anything where, and I'm sure it's been studied, where we actually have an evaluation of the effectiveness versus a classroom environment or something like that. Is there a study, I'm sure with these universities involved, there must be, that shows a measurable metric? I mean, how effective are students that take correspondence courses versus those that take live training?
Go ahead.
Actually, there are hundreds of studies. And that's part of the problem, because there's hundreds of different course designs. And which variable actually makes a difference. Okay, so there are actually hundreds of academic studies, and the Department of Education did a report on a study of the studies. Okay?
Study the studies.
Study the studies to determine what kind of, whether they could make any general findings, okay? And so let me establish this benchmark first, which is what they find, is that there's not an appreciable difference. Okay? There's not an appreciable difference overall between the test-taking success of those who have the classroom experience versus a non-classroom experience. Okay? That includes all kinds of, there's correspondence in a very classic sense, all the way to highly interactive, super well-designed online, well, as I said, highly interactive. There's too many variables. When you say correspondence, you know in your mind what you think you mean. And if I asked every single person to write a definition for correspondence, no one would come up with the same definition, okay? That's why we keep going back to the Department of Education's language as a root, because that actually applies across higher education. Now, there are, and it is not perfectly clear, okay? So, from the metric side, we don't want to abandon any delivery methodology without specific evidence that, one, there are abuses of that component. And I'll just use one component, okay? It needs to be, the person that is claiming the credit for the course needs to be the person who took the course. How about that? Okay, student identity. You can't get your secretary to take the class for you and you claim the credit. Can't do that. Okay, so she might be smarter than you, or a better test taker, whatever. But there are course designs, and this is one of the areas that it's a serious problem. There are course designs where student identity controls are virtually non-existent. If you're willing to perjure yourself and say, I was really the person, I took the exam and I want the credit. Okay? If you're willing to perjure yourself, that's the only identity requirement in some course designs. That's simply not enough. So, is it sufficient? Is it adequate? What additional controls? So that's the kind of thing that we want to, and the committee the Education Standards Advisory Committee has agreed to meet with stakeholders and talk through the areas that are weak, where we know there are abuses and where there are demonstrated weaknesses in some course design. It's not a whole category, but when we establish the fix, there needs to be a minimum student identification standard. You know what? It applies across the board to any delivery type. If you're in the classroom, you still got to produce 2 forms of identification, or a form of identification and have a proctor or whatever. Yeah, not to vote. So I don't know if that really helps you, Mike, or not.
For as an agenda item, basically, you're not looking for a motion or anything on this. You're just kind of bringing it up, putting this on, putting this on notice, getting a volunteer.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
voluntold.
Since both ESAC and the inspection committee are looking at how to strengthen the correspondence courses.
So out of the last meeting, basically status quo right now in correspondence.
Right.
And then put together a work group.
Yeah,
work on it together,
stakeholders.
and then bring it forward later on.
Exactly.
That's what we're looking for.
This is such, correspondence is such that I don't think you'll ever get rid of it, but it's so difficult to do anything with, because one of the major complaints we have is content, and some of the correspondence course we have, I think everyone in this room can tell a story of having done it or having known someone who did it. It takes an online correspondence course in 40 minutes. That's a 16-hour course. But then you get into how fast does the average person read? What's their comprehension rate? How much material can you put in that's going to be effective? What should the substance of it be? And it's not that the concept's not inherently flawed, the application is.
Right.
And so, but a resolution of it is extraordinarily complex. So
But there are colleges and universities that currently deliver correspondence, in that classic sense, correspondence, courses with controls that are peer-reviewed, that are set in place by their accrediting agencies, okay? But we don't know what all of those are. And so that's really why we want all the stakeholders to come together.
I'm good with this.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
And talk about those specifics.
Stan, you put on speaking on 9?
No, that's fine.
Donna?
Okay.
And John, do you still want to speak on 9?
Please.
This, and you understand what the topic is, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think I got an understanding of it.
And I'll put you no more than 10 minutes.
No, I don't think it'll take that long. I had mentioned earlier that the core class process seems very complex to me, but that's a side point. My concern is that, in my experience, you can send 10 students to the best university, and 5 of them are going to excel and 5 of them are not, and that is the student's choice. It doesn't matter how you structure that course, you cannot lead, you can lead the horse to water, you cannot make them drink, okay? I know people who went to the best universities, never passed, okay? So I think correspondence really, like a lot of other trade association or regulatory agencies, when they just say, did you get your 16 hours? And you check a box and then that's it. And then it's subject to a random audit at a later date. There are hundreds of courses out there that are excellent, that are being excluded by TREC rules. And so what that's doing is that's hurting the people who really do want to learn. I mean, they're still going to go take those courses, but what you're doing is you're boxing all these theoretical bad inspectors. You're creating these rules to try to force bad inspectors to learn, but you're hurting the entire industry by doing that. It just needs to be opened up on continuing education. And so Mr. Oldmixon's comment on statistical evidence, the test pass rate is up 39% now. It's supposed to be what, 70 or 80, but it's up to 39%?
It's higher.
Pardon me?
It's higher.
It's higher?
51, 58.
60%? But is it meeting the objective? So if we take, if say, the test pass rate is not meeting the objective, but let's look at the other hand. When we studied this 5 years ago, and it could be restudied now, the number of complaints that were justified in the Real Estate Commission compared to the number of estimated inspections was about 1 justified complaint out of 57,000 inspections. There is really no problem with home inspection. There are not massive consumer damages occurring. E&O is not being shredded. The recovery fund was hardly ever used before E&O. There's just not a problem with home inspection education. If you look at, sure, maybe the 20, 30% that pass the test, they're doing so dadburn good, they're not getting complaints. So regulating continuing education to just throttle everything, I think is a bad idea.
And what are you looking for? What is a recommendation?
My recommendation is essentially just to make the process much easier in terms of it. I don't believe that you have to review the syllabus. For example, just pull one out of the air. Simpson Strong-Tie has one of the best engineering educational presentations on metal connectors there is. Period, hands down. They're not going to take the time to fill an application out and send it to this agency. These courses are taught by professional engineers. They are superb. There's beyond right, but we can't get credit for it. Pentair Corporation, major manufacturer of pool pumps, excellent online training, outstanding training, but they don't qualify, and they're not going to send an application into TREC. There are I could come back and probably give you a list of 300 excellent courses that just won't qualify. And in my opinion, a lot of these courses that I have taken in just vastly exceed any approved course I've ever taken at Trek. Okay, just because it's new technology, it's engineering presentations. So it's just, you just got to make somehow a method of letting the student present the course, saying, hey, I went to this Simpson-Strong tie course, and letting it go through. It's just so complex in the world of continuing education that it's just cattle shooted everyone into a narrow band of what's accepted to get your license to work. But like I said at the very beginning, the good students are going to go, they're going to get educated. The bad students aren't, and I don't care how much you continue to force them down the cattle chute, they're still not going to get it.
Thank you, John. Do you have that? Steve, you got?
Yes.
Okay.
He's internalizing it, right?
Right.
Mr. Chairman, so just one comment on that, because I wanted to let John know that, in fact, the Education Subcommittee actually agreed to look at those issues.
I'm sorry.
The Education Subcommittee has agreed to look at those issues. So that is in fact, we talked about it at the last meeting, that there are tons of other education certificates, all kinds of stuff that are related, experience that's related, that we don't currently under our rules recognize, that we ought to. And they're willing to look at that.
That's wonderful. It's
a step in the right direction.
It's a step in the direction. It's just like I have to go get 16 hours to get my license through a process. It looks like it's just going to narrow down the educational process to a very narrow list of providers approved by a very narrow list of approved agencies that qualify to approve courses, IDEC, other courses, etc. It's just narrowing it so small. Well, we have this huge world of the internet and massive corporate budgets putting money into education, and we can't use it.
Thank you. Mike Cothran?
Just so that the subcommittee can have some reference. Mike Cothran, sorry. Just have some point of reference. Those who are code certified in the room know that when you go to place your CEUs on the code certification to renew them, they accept course topics rather than who presented them. They will take Trek approved courses, they will take TAPRIA courses, Terry courses, they will take obviously their own courses from colleges and universities. Their idea is just simply, if it has to do with fasteners for residential, they love to have that as part of their renewal applicants' base of knowledge. It's actually a big deal, particularly with our wind standards in the state of Texas. So, just as an aside there.
And just kind of trying to compare the apples and oranges, the ICC is a certification versus this being a license. Because a certification doesn't give you authority to do anything, where a license does. So this requires a little more scrutiny, and that's probably.
If you want to be a building official in Texas, you have to have that certification.
Yes, but it
The
doesn't.
building official has a lot more authority.
But a certification doesn't give you doesn't give you the right to do anything. It shows a proof of education, or proves that you have a competence level. It doesn't give you a license to do anything. The difference between a certification and a license. And that's why, ICC is a little lighter on the requirements they accept, because they know you still, it's a difference, whereas a license requires a little more scrutiny.
But we will accept courses. If a course is approved for ICC, we
Yes.
will accept that course.
And that's in the rules.
Yeah, because okay, trade industry. Good. Number 10, discussion possible action regarding continuing education credit for attending inspector committee meetings. Fred.
We had this discussion at the Education Subcommittee, and Administrator Olmexon pointed out that this is in the ethics rules, and nobody's really going to consider it unless the ethics rules change. And if so, I think you put it on the back burner to be brought up at a future time when it may be possible to actually do something about it.
As part of the legislative wish list, to be able for commission, board, and committee members and staff to make presentations for which credit can be given, okay? That authority does not currently appear in the statute, and therefore the current Ethics Commission rules say you cannot. And so it's on our wish list for the next legislative session to get that authority for the commission and the board, and then of course it would trickle down.
Okay.
But as the aside, the time you spend here is not just what you spend in meetings, as those of you who are chairing now know. And most of the time, we have not even been compensated for our expenses of travel or anything else. And I don't think compensating for continuing education, again, I've learned more here than I've learned at virtually any seminar I've gone to, except for code classes. So I think it's hard, it's a bare minimum of compensation for what you do here. So, and again, I won't benefit from it, so.
Okay. Thank you, Fred. Any other discussion on 10?
Can I comment?
Yes.
I oppose it. You're
You're
the advisory
You're
committee-
John Cahill, right?
John Cahill again. I'm sorry, but even though they are an advisory committee, they're a public servant. I don't think they should be compensated. I don't think, me coming here, I don't think I should get credit for that. I just disagree.
I agree with that.
Disagree. And likewise with you, Fred. I understand. I think if you are here, you're here to serve your industry and the public, and you shouldn't receive any form of compensation in terms of educational accreditation. Now, as far as getting gas money, I'm okay with the gas money, but not the education.
Thank you, John. Ed, you put your name down for this. You pass. Is there any recommendations for future agenda items at this time?
February 28th.
Future agenda items, not dates, but future agenda items.
I have a question that may be an agenda item. Has all the work been done on for the legislative session for strategic planning?
It has not.
Okay. I was wondering because I didn't think it was time yet, but I wasn't sure. That was my only question.
Time for what?
Strategic planning.
No,
Well, we've been through the
strategic planning has been
strategic
done.
planning process.
Yeah, that was done.
We're just finishing up, looking at things, as he said, the list of things we think need to be
Is there
addressed.
anything that needs to come before the committee for the strategic planning that
No, it was not
affects inspectors?
anticipated that this session, that chapter 1102 would be open.
That's what my memory was, but I wasn't clear.
It's like every other session for every law. It's about enough.
So my suggestion for deregulating wasn't taken.
Repealing 1102?
What a
That
surprise.
was, wow. I think that was Mr. Cahill's recommendation, wasn't it? You just seconded it?
Third, fourth,
Hey, Doug, when is the next commissioners meeting?
November the 18th,
And then the one right after that, before we need to meet again,
February the 11th, I believe.
February the 11th. So we need to meet 30 days ahead of time,
I've got it on the 17th.
Well,
for some reason.
not necessarily 30.
That's what I
2 weeks ahead
At
of
least
time.
2 weeks, minimum.
Probably the third one,
Minimum
that's right
2
after
weeks.
President's Day.
We
No,
get
it's
back
in
there.
conjunction
In
with
conjunction
the mid-
with-
Tony's fighting his lip right
The
there.
Monday after the midweek.
He's like, the more time the merrier.
That's not at all the way I feel. I like you guys.
We entertain.
So you have the
But you need a
11th and the
minimum of 2
17th
weeks.
What's that?
We need a minimum.
A minimum of 2 weeks, just so anything.
for the commissioners meeting,
February the 11th, I believe, is great.
February the
Just to
11th,
make
which is
sure
a
we-
Wednesday.
If there's anything that comes out, we have the ability to get it prepared and present.
What about,
So for-
February the 9th?
January for ourselves? No, the commissioners are meeting February the 11th.
That'd be a little close.
So we need to meet in January.
We want it Friday or Monday?
Monday the 19th is Martin Luther King Day.
What about the 12th?
That'd be good.
We're closed.
Don't they
You
need
can
a
come, but we won't be
February
here.
meeting?
You want to?
Oh,
You
wait,
don't
that's
want
true.
to elect
You got, Carrie makes a good point. The committee elects officers in February, so you'd have to have a meeting in February to do that anyway.
In February.
Yeah, so that.
But you're too close to the commission.
So we're
date.
too close to the commission date.
Statutorily, the committee has to
Hey,
meet
hey,
in
Bill, will
February.
you move your meeting?
Sure.
No problem. Are we saying we have to have 2 meetings?
Well, you could, I mean,
The reason it's held on that day is that's in conjunction with the mid-year real estate people being in town.
Okay, so we can meet on February the 6th and still fall within our 10-day, is that right? If they're on the 17th.
No, they're on the 11th.
Oh, the 11th, oh, okay.
Excuse me, they're on the 9th. You're not here.
They're on the 9th.
The commissioners are on the 9th.
February 9th, I believe, is the right date.
I shouldn't have done this again.
I mean,
They
just,
wanna
you
have
know,
two
I mean,
meetings.
like-
Brian, wait. There's
Are they on
nothing on
Monday
the,
or-
Monday.
there's nothing on the agenda for us unless something comes from the next commission meeting.
Well, it'll be 212 will be proposed, so any comments that come back from
Right.
212, you might want to.
Well, why don't we wait and see if there are any comments that come back? Because
Right.
we can't meet the first part of February with their schedule. So unless there's something on the board, why schedule a meeting in January and then have to schedule one in February?
you could do it telephonically though, if you just wanted to do it
You are
to.
not helping.
No, I'm just saying, if you wanted to do it just to deal with that agenda
That is Johnny.
item of electing the officers, you could do that telephonically.
Well, you don't know who the new members are.
That's true. They
There may not be any new
Yeah.
members in, Fred.
Yes,
The
there
new
is.
members, the
won't
new
be
members
appointed
wouldn't be,
until
they would be
February.
appointed in February. There wouldn't be any new members until the
So-
They're
February
supposed to be
commission
appointed
meeting.
in February.
So they could have a meeting after the commission meeting.
To elect the
February
officers,
to
you
elect.
could.
It just says, let's see
But
what
why
it
have
says.
two?
What's the rules say?
Yeah, we don't want to.
Statutorily, we have to elect officers in February.
Well, that's why I said you could do it telephonically. That's why I threw that out.
Yeah.
But if they announce new members, those members would be on the telephone conference. That would be the first
That
meeting.
was, that was
And they would-
prior
They're
to
members.
my,
So you're talking about us, having a normal meeting in January and then have a telephone meeting in February to do officers.
All it
Correct.
says is a regular meeting.
That's what I was
in February of
suggesting,
each year,
unless you
committee
wait
shall
till
elect
after the commission
divided
meeting, then you could
Right.
just have one meeting and
And
do it.
there's
in
no exception.
It's a rule.
No, we have to meet in February.
But all that February meeting is to elect officers.
Right.
It doesn't have anything to do with appointments. Mr. Wilcox.
6 through 10.
So we just have to.
I am
set
trying
an
hard,
hour,
and
so-
nobody is quiet.
I know what you're
Brian,
trying
and Chairman,
know.
you can dictate this.
The dictate.
Yes.
Dictatorship, yeah. That's what I've been known by anyways.
Why don't we just do it after the commission meeting?
Just have a regular meeting after the commission meeting.
In
Uh,
February?
what-
16.
Yeah, the rule that would be coming back for us to review, which, that would be the one with just
212.
12. That would be up for adoption in February.
And if there's comment, we need to have a meeting on that, we could do it.
Why can't we do that by phone?
You could.
Okay.
Either one.
If we
Either
need
one.
it.
Yeah, you could.
You have
Oh,
all
but
the
that, we're
meetings.
not pushing any deadlines or anything.
No. The only deadline is internally to give us the ability to get something that comes out of that you vote on to the commission if we needed to.
And we don't have any.
Right, yeah,
But that's not, there's no hard deadline that you need to meet
right, because
sometime
the only
prior.
thing we have there is March of 2016 would be the only thing that changes in that one. So that's not pressing.
Right.
Yeah, it's not a pressing issue, so.
Just pick a date February.
Yeah, so let's meet after the commissioners in February.
Do we want to do it a Friday or Monday?
Yes. The 13th is out.
Yeah, because, yeah,
Why is
Valentine's
the
Day is
13th
the.
Why?
Because the board meets on the 13th, right?
Is
The 20th
Oh, I'm
would
sorry.
be the
the
third
20th.
Friday.
I apologize. I'll shut up now.
Well, as long as the commissioners perform their
20th is the
designated
third Friday.
functions, I don't care.
That's the board, the TLCB.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's
So
okay.
we're waiting.
13th?
Is Friday better for everybody or Monday?
Well, 13th's the day before Valentine's Day for anybody that might be taking their spouses on a
Inclined.
small
It's my
trip.
anniversary.
Is that, oh, well, we won't do it.
Right into
on-
Oh, you
No,
romantic devil,
Valentine's.
you.
And
Make
you're
sure I-
taking her somewhere
The
wonderful.
whole world
Yes.
So the
reminds
20,
me.
the
Yes.
20th or the 27th? Which, what is your preference?
No, the 20th is
when the
not an
board- the
option.
board
Can't do the 20th.
Can't do the 20th.
You could
That's
do the-
our board meeting.
The 13th,
I don't care.
I move we do the 27th
What?
of February.
27th.
or the, s-
27th?
No, you're not over till you're removed, and you won't be.
Is everybody?
Barbara needs to be removed at the commission meeting.
Hey, Fred,
Barbara,
Fred,
what?
Fred. 27th of
Barbara
February?
needs to be
don't care.
reappointed.
If we have to do it Friday, that's fine.
Okay. The 9th is right before their meeting, which, and then the 23rd, Friday or Monday? 23rd or 27th?
Monday.
Monday.
I prefer Sundays.
Either's fine. I'll be there in Austin. Leaving on the
They know
2nd.
if they need it.
No,
Okay, February 27th.
no, you are automatically renewed at the end of your 2 years.
That's not how that works.
Yes, it is.
That's not how that works.
It is. It's a secret
So-
clause.
The next meeting,
just tried to
February the
clarify.
27th, is, does anybody want to have a subcommittee before the full committee?
No, they don't.
I do.
You want to have a subcommittee? So the full subcommittee will meet at 9 o'clock, standards practice, and the full committee will meet at 11.
You notice I am not writing.
What day was that?
The 27th.
February the 27th.
11 a.m. February. Friday.
Yes, sir.
All right. We've covered all the agenda items. We'll adjourn the meeting at 1 o'clock even. Thank you, everybody, for being here.